Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. My guest today is Esther Tadjiev, who is the founder and owner of the Parlour here in Florence. And the Parlour, what it looks like is a luxury nail salon, and it is that, but there is so much more bubbling beneath the surface. And I invited you here today, Esther, to talk about everything you do, how you build community in Florence through this incredibly beautiful space you've created. And I was so intrigued. You and I have this thing where we run into each other all the time. And I love that. And I think when you run into someone as often as you and I run into each other, it means that you're supposed to be having a conversation. And so, I don't know, we met in a very random way. Years ago, we were at Formaggioteca. I think I was there having a drink with Mary, and you were there. And so that was the first time we met. And then we sort of kept running into each other. But I said, I really want you on the podcast because you've done something so innovative in Florence. And then last spring, I went to an event that you hosted at the Parlour with Aparna from the 22, and you did a founder's sort of fireside chat. And it was that moment that I was like, no, I've got to get Esther on the podcast because I loved your story. I really was. I'm getting chills now when I think about it. I was really inspired by what prompted you to found the Parlour. So I am so thrilled to have you here. And I thought we could start with your telling us a little bit about your background, which is not in luxury nail salons, but it is in the luxury sector, and what brought you to Florence from New York.
Thank you, Fosca. Thank you. Thank you, number one, for having me here. Thanks, first of all. I'm very, very excited. This has been a long time coming, and we have been orbiting each other for quite a while and talking about this. So I'm happy we finally have the opportunity to sit down and chat. This has been something in the making. It's hard to start, right? I feel anybody you speak to when you're talking about, it's that big question, what brought you to Florence?
Yeah.
What brought you to Florence? And everybody has such an incredible story. And for me, I'd love to say that it was something that was really, really thought out, but it was a whim. To be fair, it was a whim. I had separated from my role at Sotheby's auction house, where I was the senior vice president of the luxury division, working globally in all of the sales offices, so traveling a lot. Yeah. And I separated from there. And I always say, people ask me, what brought you to Florence? And jokingly, it's always a non-compete. I couldn't work globally for a year.
Okay.
And so it was a forced break I had to take for a year. And I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to sit and do nothing in New York City. This is an opportunity for me to go out and do something I've always wanted to do, continue to travel. And I said to myself, I want to learn another language. I already speak a few. And so I said, I'm going to sign up for Italian classes. And when I started to do the research, everything pointed to Florence because that's where the original Italian comes from. And so I said, all right, I'll book myself in for a 3-month class for Italian. And I came here, and after 2 weeks, I was like, okay, what's going on here, And I always say that Florence has this thing that it does to people. It, like, your nervous system just goes whoosh. Yeah. And I don't know if it was, after such years of working and flying all around and traveling for work, I was fortunate to have incredible roles for incredible companies. I was at Sotheby's auction house. I was at Chanel for years. So I've had wonderful, incredible opportunities. And when people ask me, what did you do before? And I always say I worked in luxury, but what does that actually mean, right? Yeah. What is luxury? And it's a word that encompasses so much and means so many different things to different people, right? So we can get into that a little bit later. But that's what originally brought me to Florence. And, after 3 months, I said to myself, okay, how am I going to figure this out? I don't want to go back. And so I used it as base for the first year, and I traveled and I did a full immersion Italian course, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., every day for 3 months. And so that was my first introduction. And, I met all Italian friends miraculously. I started dating somebody, and that's a different story. But yeah, so that was my introduction into Florence. And I was like, okay, how do I figure it out? I went back to New York. I got a student visa, and I managed to figure out how to stay for a year. And then, we're into 2020 already, and COVID hit.
So you were already here when
I
the
was
pandemic
here.
hit.
I came in 2018.
Okay.
Before it was, there were people that were trickling in.
For sure.
In 2018, not like it's going on
No.
now.
Post-pandemic,
everything changed the world.
Which was perfect timing for your business, probably.
Correct.
And we'll get to that. So keep going. I love this.
So I stayed throughout COVID. Everybody, they're like, Americans have to go back. And I said, I'm not going back. There was a moratorium on the permessi di soggiorni. And so I was able to stay because they weren't kicking you out. Everything was just fermo. And so I stayed and I continued to stay. And then I had been contacted by a luxury real estate company here who saw that I spoke multiple languages, who saw that I worked in luxury, there's that word again, in the U.S. And they had asked me to come on board as a collaborator for sales development.
Okay.
And so I did that for a few years. And all the while, we're leading into the conversation of, I think, the initial question is, why the parlor? Where did the idea come from?
That's right.
And genuinely speaking, personal need.
Yeah.
Like for me, my thing, and I've been getting manicures and pedicures since I was 15 years old. It was my thing.
Yeah.
And every time I would go here, I'd be like, no. Come on. No. And there were talented estheticians.
Oh yeah, the training is rigorous for estheticians
the training
here.
is rigorous here, but there isn't any development. There isn't any support. There isn't any, continuity in the experience. It's and that responsibility doesn't fall on the esthetician. It falls on the owner, on the manager, on the leader. What are you creating besides delivering on a service? And so it was just one disappointment after another and after another. And, for me, having a manicure is such a personal thing. Like, I genuinely don't feel put together unless I have. But again, that's me.
Right.
It's not everyone, because a manicure isn't everyone's thing. It was mine.
Yeah.
And so, these little jokes started coming out every time I would go get a manicure. I was like, oh, I got to open a place. No, I got to open a place. No, you don't. You don't know how good it could be here. And then I realized that there were more people like me. I would go into these studios and I would see expats and I would see how people are being treated. I was seeing how, the division between who the locals were and who the expats were, who spoke Italian, who didn't speak Italian, and the difference of how people were being treated. And it was just a continued experience that wasn't being delivered on.
Yeah.
And so this was, already I'd been here 2-3 years by that point. I'm working at this real estate company. I've really set my roots here. I was in a relationship already, and I had no intention at the time to go back. I shipped my container stuff over.
Wow.
So I'm in Florence.
Yeah.
At this
You were like,
point.
that's it.
I'm here.
I'm staying.
I'm here. I'm staying. I'm speaking Italian. This is going to be my home.
Yeah.
And so slowly, as life continued, you start to think, okay, where do I fit into community, into the society? What do I want from this experience? What do I want from this life?
Yeah.
How am I going to contribute to this life, to this, little, it's a village, Florence, right?
It's a total village. It is a small little village.
But we love it.
Of course we do.
We
Because
love
it can be
it.
very international and cosmopolitan too. But it's fundamentally just a really small town.
Absolutely.
And we all kind of know each other.
We all do.
We all do.
But then if you think about it, and I know how long you've been here, Fosca. So sit and pick your brain of how things have changed. I mean, I look at how things have changed since I've been here in 2018, and that's only 8 years ago.
Nuts. It's nuts.
The whole playing field, it's become so much more international. And I also feel like the actual local Florentines also are much more open.
For sure.
Than what, at least from when I was here originally, more open to what the international community is bringing to it, as long as they're doing it, I feel like, with respect to the culture here, right?
100%.
And so, so for, first things first, I had to learn I got my Italian down pat, and I spoke the language, and then slowly, I kept joking about, what am I going to do? Yeah. What am I going to do? How am I going to make this better? And then that's where I saw the opportunity that, for me, I think the final straw was, I remember one time I went in and I had an appointment, and I was very particular with who I would book my appointments in, and they completely
screwed it
up.
Yeah.
And so finally, in Italian, I said, guys, I've been coming here for 2 years. We won't name the place, obviously. I've been coming here for 2 years. You don't even know my name. I specifically booked with this person and this person. No, you didn't. And I would book on WhatsApp. Yeah. And so I showed them, and they were mortified because obviously, and all of a sudden I got a discount. Yeah. And all of a sudden I was treated like a local. But it took that, and I would see how, and I said, you can't do anything. The international community, the expat community is part of the fiber of this city.
Huge part of it.
Exactly.
Huge.
So you either accept them, you either understand also how to cater them, and you raise the standard.
Yeah.
And so this is where kind of like the fire was lit under me. And so that's where the idea just continuously started bubbling in.
So then, and I have to say, we were talking a little bit about how Florence has changed, and we'll get back to it later because it really was perfect timing. There really wasn't a culture. There were places where you could get your nails done.
Right.
But often it was like, in a back room at, a hairdresser's, right. Or, it was maybe there were like one or two places.
Right.
Now it's become much more common to see even places to get your nails done quickly, but sort of the way we conceive of it in the US did not exist. So I was so struck by this because you saw something that was really important to you and to your well-being and to your self-care routine that just made you feel like Esther, and you weren't getting it and you weren't satisfied. And so this spark was lit. Now tell me about then. Because, for those of you out there who do not know, starting a business in Italy is not for the faint of heart. It is really difficult. Starting a business anywhere is difficult. But how did you then go from this germ of an idea, okay, maybe this could work. I see a need. There's not really anything like this. Your background in luxury, your personal need to have a place that was not only going to provide you a service, but that would really give people a sense of belonging. So tell me a little bit more about sort of how you actually then opened the Parlour.
Yeah. So, we keep saying nail salon. We keep saying it's a nail salon. We're doing nails. It's a studio. It's this. And you start from, obviously, if you think about just the name, right? The Parlour. What does the Parlour actually mean?
Yeah.
And when you start actually diving into that, because it's in and of itself, it's a hard name for Italians to pronounce.
Yeah.
But the exercises that I started to do, I put myself in the middle of everything. And working in luxury, right? So what does luxury actually mean? People, when they talk about luxury, they think high-ticket items.
Yeah.
But that's not really it, is it? Luxury means so many different things to so many people. Luxury can mean, can I get this done in 20 minutes? Can I be in and out in 20 minutes? On the flip side, can I spend 2 hours here?
Right.
Yeah. And so it's not always, luxury doesn't necessarily always mean what's the price tag, right? And so for me, at the end of the day, in all of my roles in my careers, what luxury started to mean was, how are you making people feel? And how are they walking away after an interaction? And what is that experience, right? So it became more where previously in my previous careers or my previous roles, luxury meant I was selling a product. And here the product became that emotion.
Yeah.
Right? It became like when you're leaving, what are you leaving with? You're leaving with a feeling. Right?
Yeah.
And so how do we make sure that that feeling stays with somebody? Like, yes, we're doing treatments, but what does that treatment mean to each individual?
Yeah.
And so that's where I said to myself, this isn't just about a nail salon, right? Like, how am I going to build it here? And in the middle of everything, number one was myself. I used myself as like the woman in the center because clearly there was something missing from me.
Yeah.
And if I'm coming from a world where this was everything that I've spent 25, 30 years of a career on, how am I going to create this where people it's going to resonate with people, whether they're local Florentines, whether it's somebody just passing through, whether they're expats that are already living here. And so I started thinking about all of this, and it always came back to the why. Why would somebody want to come?
Yeah.
Why would somebody want to come back? If it's not just a one-off experience, and how do we create and change the culture where getting a service done or taking time out for yourself, if you're getting a manicure and a pedicure or a facial, I mean, we have multiple services that we have, but how does it become less of a chore and more of an intentional moment for yourself?
Yeah.
And so this was where I poured in a lot of thought and a lot of exercises, right? So down to the details, down to the location. And miraculously, I happen to live also on the block where the parlor is. And that in and of itself is, an area where you don't have any other kind of access.
No.
And it has to be the experience, right? So normally when you think of a nail salon, you're walking into somewhere and there's bright fluorescent lights and everything's white marble and everything's or shiny neon pink. And that's great.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful for those types of environments. For me, it had to be, I'm inviting you into my living room.
Into your parlor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, the word parlor actually derives from 18th century, 19th century. It was a room in a home where you would invite and host guests.
Right.
And you would talk after dinner. Or you would, have conversations and hold salons,
Right.
quote unquote salons where you're sitting and chatting, whether it was after dinner, before dinner. So that's where the word, the idea actually came from. But also, the area on Borgo San Jacopo, those were all buildings that were bombed after after World War II. So they were all rebuilt in the 50s and 60s. And so it brought the idea of, obviously I grew up in New York City, and it came to my mind. I'm like, the parlor was kind of like those, I always think of the movie Steel Magnolias.
Yeah, that's right. The beauty parlor.
Yes,
where everyone just goes to chat and catch up and gossip and whatever.
Exactly, with Sally Field.
Right.
And so, I was like, this is it. Like, there was so much that I took, and Giorgio, who is the architect, who taught me so much about how you pay homage to a space. Like, what was the space made? What was the space? When was it built? I was like, it was built in the 50s. The parlor is kind of like that quintessential 1950s U.S. America, parlor, beauty parlor where everybody would go to. And so the word just kept popping back into my mind. And then as I continued to do more research on the word, it also in French means to talk.
That's right. Yeah.
To speak. And also in Italian,
right.
Parlare. To speak, to talk, to, to share.
Yeah.
And so it was so obvious kind of that I was just like, okay, here we go.
Okay. And before I move on to my next question, I do want to make a comment about sort of the feeling when you walk in there because it's fundamental. First of all, I recall one time coming to visit you there and just the flow of the river out of the window. It just immediately resets your nervous system. It like slows you down. And also it's just so beautifully designed.
Yeah.
And so you do walk in and you feel like you've walked into a space that is very welcoming, very warm. It doesn't have any of the feel of sort of a traditional, it's not noisy. It's not, it just feels good to be there. So I just wanted to make that little comment.
You feel hugged.
You feel hugged. Exactly. Yeah. I keep doing this thing with my hands that you can't see because the people can't see because it's not a video episode. You feel sort of welcomed into this very warm, beautiful space. And then, the river and you have a glass of Prosecco. It's just like very luxurious if we want to go back to that. So the parlor keeps popping into your head. You've decided to do this. How do you make it happen, though? How do you make it? You find this perfect space, so it works out. How much time passed between when you had the idea and when you opened the doors?
So a good year. It was, and there were things that happened to my favor. Again, synchronicities, right?
Yeah.
Like there was a flow. And I was in a flow and I genuinely wasn't actually looking for space. Like I wasn't out in Florence running around looking at stores, looking for, going with realtors. I walked by. I saw that this space became available. There was a number on the door. I called the owner. I did a walkthrough. And I said to myself, this is, again, I think I mentioned that I live on the same block. Right. And I remember having people over for dinner at my house that were always just gobsmacked by the view, by the access. I mean, there's 10 meters on Borgo San Jacopo where you have this type of view and access, right? And that's it. Everything else, unfortunately, on that street, they're all clothing stores.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
There's nothing that you have a tangible experience to. And so I said, oh my God, this is it. This is it. And it happened like that. And there was a pop-up in the store at the time. So during the conversations with the owner of the store, I sit down and I started writing a business plan. There was the mission statement. There was the why. I started putting together ideas, what it would look like, what would it feel like, how should it look like, what could it feel like. So all of these things started coming out and everything came back to I wanted it to feel like my living room. Like I wanted it to feel that I was inviting people into my home and that they were experiencing something that in Florence you don't normally experience.
Not at all.
And so all of my years of working with client development, client experience, making sure that people feel a certain way and have a certain experience and leave with a certain emotion, I poured all of that into the thought process of what are we actually building here? Like, yes, by the way, we're going to do manicures and pedicures, but I started doing research. What products are we going to use? Mm-hmm. It's not just about the space, but like I did a year's worth of research. I met with every single product, supplier.
Yeah.
I went and did trials. I use myself as a guinea pig for everything that we do in the studio.
You did a ton of work. I mean, this is your baby. This is your business. You were filling a need, something that was missing in Florence, but your goal was not, it was so centered on what you wanted to gift your clients ultimately. And I love that. You had a very clear vision.
Right.
And you also had the experience and know-how. You weren't an entrepreneur at that point, but you had, do you have a background in entrepreneurship?
So I did, actually. I grew up in family businesses.
Okay.
Before I went off to do Uber high-end, I did grow up in family business.
Okay, so you have it in your blood.
I have it in my blood. I have it in my family. My first business, surprisingly enough, I was 19 when I opened my first business in Miami.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's something that I've always had in the back of my mind. it's like you said, it's not for the faint of heart.
No, especially here.
And
Especially here.
Here, not knowing the rules, the laws, what you need to. There's stuff that I didn't even think about. I had a wonderful support.
Okay, it's fundamental.
It is, and Giorgio was. Who was my partner, my boyfriend.
And also your architect.
Exactly.
Which is extremely helpful. Extremely helpful.
So he, and I say, I mean, I would have still done it on my own. It would have taken longer. And it wouldn't have been as seamless, but thanks to his support and direction, he was able to just put me in touch with the right people that I needed in order to get the various things done. I mean, opening a nail studio, the interior or the sanitation process is that of a medical office.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that we had to go through. But going back to the idea and how it all just came to be, but also the interior decoration. When you walk in, and it's exactly what you said, from the minute you walk in, you see the Arno.
Right.
And that also bled into the interior space. Mm-hmm. And what I was saying before was paying homage to what that should feel and look like, right? We're in Florence. So if you walk in, for those of you who haven't been in yet, and please do walk by, anybody, we're always open. Stop by for a coffee, stop by to say hello. We always welcome anyone who just wants to come in and see the space also. The colors
are
themselves,
beautiful.
They are typical Florentine colors.
Yeah.
And if you would imagine, Fosca, this is not a detail that many people know. The original decor interior was all meant to be navy blue. If you can believe it or imagine it.
Was that your idea?
Initially, it was my idea.
You were like, I want everything navy.
I want everything navy because initially, when I took over the space, I took it over as it was. There were these wooden planks on the floor. So I thought that there was these gorgeous wooden floors, and I want to do this shabby chic, and I wanted to do this kind of navy walls, and then the guys came in to start working. He's like, what are we doing with these floors? I was like, what do you mean? You just need to polish them. You know, everything's going to be blue. And Giorgio, from the beginning, he was like, I don't know about the navy. I don't know about the navy. So the guy comes over with a crowbar, taps over, and starts lifting these wooden, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, sweetie, they're fake. I'm like, what? Starts lifting everything, and they check, and we found these original marble Palladiana floors that you see when you walk in now. From the 50s. The original floors that were covered in 3 inches of grout of I don't even know what. It took a week. We completely scrapped the design. We went back to the drawing board, and it had become what, and it's so funny because Giorgio tells me all the time, he's like, I told you it was never meant to be navy blue.
It's never meant to be navy blue.
It was never meant to be navy blue. But even this, like, things happen organically, and what it was meant to, how it was meant to show itself, it eventually did.
I love that.
And I feel like also, even something small like that, when you walk in, and the first thing that people always say to me is like, how calming the colors are.
Yeah.
How wonderful it feels. Like it just, like you just sit, and it's so relaxing to be inside. Yeah. And the way that we did design it, you're literally being hugged.
You really are.
By the colors. By the Arno River, obviously. And I don't know if people ever think about this, but there was always studies done, and I learned this later, that if you spend 20 minutes near a body of water, any kind of body of water, and this is something that we're so fortunate that we spend the entire day there, that it does something to your nervous system also.
I knew that, I know that because I'm like that. I need in an ideal world, I would live at the beach.
Yeah.
I think living in a city with a nice river is a good compromise.
Exactly.
But that's what I said. Like the minute you walk in, something shifts in you. And I imagine that the longer you stay, the deeper that effect is.
Yeah.
So what did people say when you opened? What were the reactions?
So, in the beginning, like any entrepreneur, you think, oh my God, is anybody going to come? And how do you start? And there were so many setbacks. Like in Florence, there are, like in anything in Italy, we had to wait an extra month because we couldn't get a permit for so we opened 3 months later than we should have.
Okay.
And there was this buildup. But people came, and the question was, our protocol is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
The products that we use are completely different. We use we're a mono-brand studio, and we use biosculpture gel products, which after all of the research that I had done, it was the best system on the market.
Okay.
Our entire philosophy is built on health, the health of your nails.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do any type of overfiling. We refuse services all the time that people ask us to do, and we're like, it's not healthy for your nail.
That's great.
We can't work on this nail. Your nails are severely damaged. I mean, the things that we uncover from people that are coming in, and it's literally all about re-educating the person that comes in and sits in our chairs. And we get it all the time. In the beginning, there was some resistance, but the more we stuck to it and the more we stuck to the fact that we're educating people that nails need to be thought about like your hair, like your skin, like your facial, like you wouldn't just put anything on your face. Why would you do that for your nails?
Yeah.
And it literally started to be about educating people, but it's also something that I had gone through, because the minute I had this idea for this project, it was about, I started hyper focusing on everything. When I would go get a manicure before we actually opened, I'm like, okay, what products are they using? And then I noticed that, they're using one brand for the actual gel, but the lamps are different. And is that meant to go together, And so there was one top coat, there was one base coat, there was one this was different, and everything was mixed. And so I started doing research into that. I'm like, but is that meant to be? Like, are they meant to work together? How do you know that lamp?
Not.
How do you know that lamp works for that gel, So these are all things that I started thinking about. And then when I thought about the product that I wanted, I started thinking, okay, I don't want to mix. I want one brand. So which brand has the entire system? And then when I started digging into everything like that, I had the top 3. And then I said, okay. And then I saw that 2 of the top 3 were manufactured in China. Which I said, oh, okay. So if they're manufactured in China, then they don't own their research and development. They don't own their bottling. They don't own this. They don't own that. Who else is that bottling company? So all of these things that you don't even, my mind was blown.
Yeah.
My mind was completely blown. Yeah. It sounds so banal, but
it is not banal, though. No, it's not. And
you don't think about these things, but this is the amount of detail that I was like, okay, what are we, what am I building here?
Yeah.
I'm not just putting anything on the shelves. Like, it's all part of the amount of detail that I became obsessed with.
Yeah. And I think that the things that come out here are, knowledge and building trust.
Yeah.
I love when somebody says to me, I'm not going to make you pay for this because it's going to damage your whatever.
Yeah.
In other words, I appreciate that. I'm going to go back to a place like that because you don't just want my money. You want me to come back. You want me to trust you. And you want me to put my care in your hands, literally.
Yeah.
And that's something, I think that's what comes through in your brand.
Yeah.
I also want to tell you that when you did open, there was a lot of buzz. I kept hearing about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was just like, zzz. And Also because your timing was impeccable. And I do want to touch on, because you mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast, and it's a subject that really intrigues me, is just how much Florence has changed post-pandemic.
It has, yeah.
And so also, I think, I've been here for like 30 years, and it used to be, it's still a village, a small town, but then it was a different small town. There were maybe 2 luxury hotels. It wasn't, Florence always has this elegance, but it didn't have that very cosmopolitan feel that it has now. And that's something that Florentines and, non-Florentines now expect, And so here you open this place when things were shifting, because they hadn't quite shifted yet, right? So what do you do there are a couple of things I'm curious about. It's evident that you did a lot of homework, you did a lot of research, you wanted to build something that was impeccable. And I love that, because it shows, it speaks to how serious you are. It speaks to not only your entrepreneurship, but you took this very academic approach, right? But I also want to know how you cultivate and build community, because I think that's the real distinctive factor. In addition to, it's a beautiful space. There are plenty of beautiful spaces. We're in Florence, but you don't always feel good when you walk into places here, because, sometimes you don't feel that welcome. So how do you build community? How do you keep people coming back because they want that feeling?
Yeah, and you touched on it, right? It's community at the end of it. I made a decision in the beginning that I was going to be there every single day. I wanted to get to know every single person that came through our doors. Even if you're starting with the team, right?
Yeah.
Building the team that's right for the type of service and level of service that we provide. You learn also what you thought, and I've built teams before in my previous roles, but working with a completely different culture, you learn that, okay, the technique and the skill set could be there, but how do you teach something that doesn't exist here?
Yeah.
Right? The idea of community building here in Florence is really new. A lot of places before weren't focusing on that, right? Everything was a service. Everything is here. This is what we're selling you. Here's what you're buying. But nothing was about the idea of building and putting a community or cultivating a community together. And so for me, it was a conscious decision to be there morning, noon, and night all day long for the first couple of years. And I'm still there. I still participate in it, and learning and delivering on all of my years of experience, right? So in my previous roles, yes, I was selling something, but like I said to you before, it's how you make somebody feel. And how do you make somebody feel is by when they're walking in through the door is saying, Fosca, hi.
Yeah.
You must be Fosca if it's your first time, right? So calling somebody by their first name, taking their coat off for them, walking them personally to their seat. And they sound, again, like things that are banale, but
they're not.
They're not. They're
Especially
not
in today's world.
Exactly, because you don't have. It's not rocket science.
No.
It's not. It's humanity.
Yeah.
And it's making somebody feel welcome. It's making somebody feel seen, because at the end of the day, people are walking in with their, a good day they're having, a bad day they're having, we get people walking in with tears where
I'm sure.
There's just so much space that we need to hold. And that's what it's really about, right? And we literally are holding people's hands in our hands. And we're there for it. And these are the trainings that I do, so many trainings with my team. Obviously about the technique, but also about the other side of it. are we providing as a service? How are we making people feel when they're walking in, and how are we making sure that they're feeling a certain way when they're leaving us, and how that emotion lasts with them for the rest of the day? And really, that was what I brought. In my previous roles, I would do like week-long trips with clients in Paris or in different areas, and we would do these experiences, one-offs, and really, really specific. And it's hard to reimagine that in a nail salon. Yeah. How do you do that? Yeah. But something simple as we know it's somebody's birthday, we have them a cake for them. That's unexpected. Now it's expected because everybody sees it on our social.
Now I know where I'm going on my birthday. I also
which
know
is totally fine.
I also know what cake you serve because you serve the Irish cake, which is from my local pasticceria, and it is arguably the best cake.
Yes.
And so, yes, I'll be there on September 28th for my cake.
I'm making a note of that.
Yes.
September 28th.
I have to say, though, what I love about your whole story is, and it goes back, you explained that episode, you went to the place to get your nails done, and they didn't know your name after 2 years, and they didn't know you had very specific requests, and you wanted to make sure that nobody who walked into the parlor ever felt the way you felt. I probably would have walked out. You were good, because I would have been like, you know what? You know what? It happened to me only once, and Florentines are not like notorious for being like super friendly. Again, it's changed a little, but way back in the day, I remember just somebody was like exceptionally rude to me in a store where I was like ostensibly purchasing things. Like I'm spending my money here. And at a certain point, I was just like, you know what? I don't need to give you my money. I'm leaving, And so I love how you transformed that moment of just like the feeling of not being seen and heard. And like, I've been coming here for 2 years. Hello. Yeah. And you wanted to be sure that never happened to any of your clients.
Yeah. No, I'm fortunate enough that I have an absolutely ridiculously good memory. I remember everything. I remember people that have only come once and they come back and I remember them by their first name and they're just looking at me incredulously. Yeah. But those details and my team, bless them, I am so fortunate. I have an incredible team. But this goes back to, it goes back to leadership.
It is.
Like I've set the example. They know what my standards are, and they have each and every single one of them. Even if I'm not there, they deliver the same exact level of experience, level of service. They know everybody's names. They know how everybody likes their tea. They know how people like their coffees. I don't know if you know that we serve also almond milk, soy milk, and that is a funny story in and of itself also, which I should probably tell you because it's hysterical.
Tell me.
But even things like that, we don't ask
details, Esther.
Yeah,
details.
We don't ask I know who likes to be with which therapist. They don't ever have to be in an uncomfortable position where they say, I prefer to be. We know. Yeah. We know who likes to be served by who, be treated by whom. So, small things like that where you don't need to constantly always say, you come in, you know what you're going to get. Each and every time, it's never a surprise. Mm-hmm. It's always the same consistent ritualistic experience.
Perfect.
And so,
tell me the story about the milk.
Oh my gosh, the milk. The milk, Christiana, if you ever listen to this, it's all your fault and you know it, so it's fine. We had a client come in one time. This is an actually really funny story. We had a client come in one time. It was the mother of a client that would come frequently. And she was from the States. She was probably mid-60s, if 70s, something like that. And we serve cappuccinos. We have a cappuccino maker. And so I said, would you like a cappuccino? She was like, yeah, sure. I'll have mine with almond milk, please. And I just looked at her and I said, oh, I'm really sorry. We don't have almond milk. You don't? A place like this doesn't have almond milk? And it took me so by surprise. I wasn't offended. I was like, wow. How come I didn't think of this?
Right. How did I miss that?
Why didn't I think of this? So I said, I'm really sorry. She's like, okay, fine. Well, if you don't have almond milk, soy milk, will do. And I said, ma'am, I'm really sorry. We only have regular milk. And she's like, that's surprising, but okay, fine. Fine. She had her cappuccino with regular milk. In comes another client. And she sat down also, and she would never get a she always got an espresso. I said, Christiane, would you like a cappuccino? She's like, I mean, I never wanted to tell you this. I would love a cappuccino, but only if you have almond milk. I said, you know what? Give me 5 minutes. I took 20 euros out of the till. I ran over to
Yeah, to the Conan, and you got...
I got almond milk, soy,
oat milk, you name it. Now we have it.
And now we have it. And so she didn't know where I went because, her head was to the back. And I said, okay, fine. And I ran back. And then I said, you know what? If this is what people are asking us for, then this is what we're going to deliver on. And so we have almond.
We have it all.
We have it all.
Because you listen to people.
See, that's
so
the thing.
This is
where it comes from.
And you didn't say, like, whatever. Like,
No.
You were like, yes, okay, we're going to do this.
We're going to do this.
So, but that just speaks to just speaks to everything we've talked about so far, just how attuned you are to the needs of the people who come in and step foot in there, because you're giving them this. It's not just the nails, and I'm making air quotes here. It's really the experience. You're giving them this moment of, we get back to luxury again, but the luxury of being able to sit down and spend an hour in the company of wonderful women in a beautiful environment, et cetera. And I know men come in too. I don't want to be discriminatory. I want to ask you, as we sort of come to the end of the podcast, I do want to know, when you look back at your journey of opening a business here, because it is not easy, what advice would you give to a young or a not young entrepreneur who wants to open up a business in Florence, a successful business, of course, ideally?
It's, there's a lot to think about, right? There's a lot to think about. Know your why, don't romanticize it. Like, learn your why first. Like, why do you want to do it? And what's the basis of that? Like, for me, there was a very crystal guiding light for me. Like, I knew what I wanted, and we didn't get more into the details of how the community was built in the Parlour. But for me, everything was about, like, the community. Now you walk into the Parlour, like, I've witnessed friendships that were created from people that were just adjacent to each other sitting that are now best friends. They've traveled the world together. Aww. I've seen people come in and whether it was a mother sitting with a daughter, dropping her off for her study abroad, sitting next to another mother who lives here with kids in school here, and exchanging phone numbers. If your daughter needs anything, I'm here. Don't worry, she's in good hands. Like that is the focus of the community. And that was my why. And I've witnessed it. I've seen it. I've seen the point of reference that the Parlour has become in Florence. And to me, that just, it fills my heart, and it makes me feel like, wow, okay, we really delivered on this.
You did.
We delivered on this why.
Absolutely.
So when I think about what I would say to anybody else looking to open, and there's different kinds of businesses, right? And so I chose a brick and mortar. And so hold true to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And that would be the first and most important thing. Like, what's your why? Who are you? Stay true to yourself, and build on that. Because if you're trying to do something where you're not at the core of it, how's it going to work?
Yeah. And I actually think, that's, in addition to the fact that you really do fulfill a need and all the other things we've said, it's so highly personal, and that shines through everywhere.
100%. And that's the last point. Like, you make it personal.
Yeah, it's your baby.
You make it personal. Yeah. You try not to make it fragile.
Right. No.
Where it falls apart if you're not there. Like, you start with the basis of yourself, like that, which is what I did. And then you put systems into place and you put, policies and procedures and you build on that. But at the core of it, how do you differentiate yourself today, right? It has to be something that's personal and about you that you bring to the table.
Yeah.
And so for me, what I brought to the table was just the idea of how obsessive I was about these details.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that is what became the differentiating factor and how much I enjoy the experience of it all, how much I enjoy the ritual of it all, how much I enjoy the fact that we are all so busy in today's day and age, and it shouldn't be a chore to take out an hour for yourself and to come and enjoy a space where everything is literally thought out for you, for the health. It's nothing that we're doing like a quick fix. We invest in training, in products, in everything is top of the line because, again, that's me. And so, so that's what I would say to somebody that's thinking about of opening a business today is really thinking about the why and really thinking about how, what's your differentiating factor.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you've created this space where, especially right now, in this particular moment in our world, not just in Florence, just really, we are increasingly, we're craving connection. We're craving community. We need those conversations. We need to have that human interaction. And also we need to take care of ourselves because it's become, the world is ever challenging, if you will. So what's next for you in the parlor, Esther? Can you give us some spoilers?
Wow. I'm thinking what I can actually share.
I knew there was something, but you share what you can.
Well, I'm always focused on deepening what we've built.
Okay.
Right? So I always joke about how do you go farther when you're the one that set the bar, right?
Yeah.
So how do you challenge yourself? Like, I've set the bar, and I say this, like, I definitely believe that we've disrupted the industry here in Florence, and I'm happy to see, and there's room for everyone, right?
Absolutely.
There's absolutely room for everyone. But I see that other centers have also raised the standard, which is good. And they should have.
I love that.
And I'm glad that it took, a space like ours to make other people recognize that this isn't a chore and that this is more of an experience. And I see everybody now serving teas and serving coffees and serving Prosecco's and serving treats. And I love it. And I love that, that other centers are doing it too. So great on them. For me, I'm thinking, how do we always refine the experience and make it better? What's missing?
Okay.
I always talk to people about that. Tell us. I want the feedback. Whether it's anonymous or to my face, I want to know everything. I want to know. Strengthening our team. There's always something where we're looking to learn. We're doing a global educator team actually coming up in 2 weeks.
Perfect.
For the entire
Wonderful.
team. We've added new services that weren't here in Florence before. We did master trainings for the team. I invest so much in that. I think it's super important. And then how do we expand the services? Because people are always asking us for additional little tiny things. So we're looking to kind of make it more of a seamless structure internally. And then who knows, when I'm thinking bigger, how do we scale? How do we scale without losing the feeling? And that's always something that I consistently talking about. I want to scale, but how do you scale without diluting what we're already delivering on? Our team is tight and small. We have space internally to add, but we want to make sure that we're keeping it intimate And so we're looking potentially outside of Florence. That could be an option.
Mm-hmm.
Never
This is
know.
interesting.
So yeah, the goal for growth isn't just for growth's sake.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do you grow without diluting what you're building on, what you've already built. And so that's where there are things that are, there are wheels in motion.
Okay.
And I'd love to come back and chat
You
more
will. No, absolutely.
things are already finalized.
Okay.
But yeah, there's definitely ideas of bringing the Parlour to a bigger audience in some way, shape, or form.
I'm so happy. And, I just have to say that knowing that you're behind it, I know that you won't lose that identity. It won't get diluted. It won't get lost when you do scale, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And I just want to thank you, not only for coming on the podcast today, but for doing something that someone like me who's like so community, connection, and I'm always, those are my sort of, go-to things. And you've really created something I think that we needed. And I love that. And I love that a space like that exists in Florence, whether it be for someone, again, who's just passing through or dropping off their kid at, study abroad, or for us long-term residents, locals and expats alike, I think you've given the city something so valuable. And I want to thank you for everything you've done. Wish you the best of luck. We'll put everything in the show notes so people know where they can find you when they're next in Florence or discover you if for some reason they haven't discovered you yet.
Thank you. And you know what? And we're always pop by. Anybody who wants to just come and say hello and introduce themselves and just see what we're all about. You don't necessarily even have to book in the first time. Just come and say hi.
Yeah.
And I feel like
they'll want to stay.
Yeah.
I think they'll want to stay. Thanks so much, Esther.
Thank you, Fosca. This has been really, really nice.
Grazie
Thank
mille.
You. Grazie mille a te.